Welcome back to the Raw Christian Men's Podcast, a place for authentic, real-life discussion on faith, masculinity, and living as a Christian man in today's world. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the struggle that men have with anger. Today, we have, as usual, Luke Rude. How you doing, Luke?
Good. You?
I'm not doing too terrible. And also, welcome back to Luke's dad. We have Mr. Bruce Rude. How you doing, Bruce?
Fine, sir. Doing well.
Doing well?
Yes, sir.
All right. And joining us for the first time today, we have Jason Young. How you doing, Jason?
Good. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
So since you're the new guy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Just a real quick background, nothing too crazy.
Yeah, married. Have 3 children, 4 grandchildren. Been married for 28 years here in April.
Okay.
And lived in this area of Walton my whole life, pretty much. A graduate of Lewis Cass High School and electrician for Snowco Pipeline.
Awesome. Welcome. So you got a lot of experience to bring to the table. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay.
So like I said in the intro, we're going to tackle the topic of anger. So we'll start off. I just want to know what your definition of anger would be. Like, I know everybody kind of has a different definition of, anger, or where that cutoff would be between, normal and angry and stuff like that. So what would you classify as anger, I guess?
Unmanageable frustration.
I like that definition. Unmanageable frustration.
I'd have to agree with that one.
Annoyance.
An annoyance. Okay. Yeah.
And along with what he said.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are saying that, because the key thing that you guys were touching on is that it was a cause of our anger is caused from another emotion, right? So anger is classified as a secondary emotion. We got anger, like the definition of anger is an emotional response that we feel too often when something feels like unfair, unjust, or threatening, often coming from frustration, irritation, and then that builds up into rage. So the root cause of anger is always a separate emotion, and it's because of something is happening that we just don't like or we're not comfortable with. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now we got the definition out of the way. I feel we can go and openly talk about the topic. So, as Christian men, do we consider anger to be sinful?
I'd say yes, if you let it linger. I think it's normal to be angry, but I think the Bible's pretty clear about letting it linger and letting it turn into sin.
I feel like you took a peek at my notes before we started.
I did not.
Okay, because you're saying a lot of the same things.
Oh, okay.
Which is great. So
I just think it's funny that you asked the only redhead around to come to an anger thing here.
Police officer. About
Oh, the policeman, not the redhead.
I'm speaking to the police, not the ginger.
I just thought it was interesting.
No. Well, first off, anger it's a natural emotion that we have, right? But unfortunately, as human beings, we are sinful. We are, we all fall short of, the glory of God. So even though it is natural, it can be sinful. Let's say it can be. Become sin when we let anger linger instead of just moving on from it. Some good scripture would be Ephesians chapter 4, 26 through 27, where he says, don't let anger linger and don't give the devil an opportunity. And then James 1, 19 through 20 says, anger doesn't produce righteousness, so be quick to listen and slow to speak and become angry. So we do have examples in the Bible of righteous anger. Probably the most popular one would be Jesus flipping the tables at the temple, right? Everybody's pretty familiar with that. That would be the one time that I can think of where, other than him rebuking his disciples, where you see Jesus get angry, physically get angry. So that would be a good example of righteous anger, because the anger stemmed from the money changers and everybody at the temple doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Their actions were a direct disrespect to God. So he was angered out of the disrespect being showed toward God, rather than something happening to us directly, which would make it more of a sinful anger than righteous anger. You guys agree?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So our anger can be righteous too, as long as, along the same example that Jesus showed when he's flipping the tables. Like if we see an injustice toward God or towards other people, we can get angry, and that would be considered a righteous anger. But most of the time, I think it's safe to say that most of the time, our anger is a result of a selfish reason. So we're feeling disrespected, or we're not getting our way. So I would like to get your guys' input or your thoughts on this so far.
I think I can't think of a day that goes by that at some point I don't get angry about something. I know we're not supposed to be that way, but we're also human. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you've noticed, but if anytime you're ever in a hurry to get somewhere, there's always that guy doing 10 mile an hour under the speed limit. Or if you're in a grocery store, there's two people stop and talk in front of you and block the aisle, or there's always something. And maybe it's like last week's sermon, maybe it's God telling me to be more patient, but it's always something. But you talked about emotion and thing that's involved with anger. So sometimes it could be a project I'm working on that's not going right. It could be moving a treadmill that doesn't want to go back together right.
Yes.
and have your wife come down and tell you, why can't you get it back together? It didn't take you that long to take it apart. Why can't you put it back together real quick? And usually I just tell her, I don't need anything from the peanut gallery. So it could be a whole litany of things throughout the day that could just, but I'm quick to get over them. Most of them, not always. And that's where I think I struggle as a Christian. Sometimes people do me wrong or have done me wrong and anger me, and that's where I struggle, is trying to get beyond that. There was I can't remember the verse. I can't remember where I read it, but it was something about don't let your anger, something about when the sun sets, it's supposed to be gone.
I think that's tied into James 1.
Okay,
the
I
two
remember.
verses that we read earlier. I think
remember
it's
my grandfather
right
talking
there.
about it, because the family name Roods, it's kind of comical. My brothers and my uncles, my cousins, there's a temper, and that temper is real. From when my dad stripped the bolt out when he's taking the alternator off the truck and he threw the wrench. Well, talk about patience. He knocked the windshield out. He busted the windshield. So he shouldn't have thrown the wrench. But so that's just something that runs in the family, kind of quick-tempered, but real quick to get over it too on most things. But where I struggle sometimes is if people do me wrong or have done me wrong, I got to get over that a little quicker.
And I think that's easier said than done. And I don't know if that's, I'm speaking from personal experience here, but I don't know if that's because of the level that we think we've been wronged or if it was just my inability to let things go. But I feel like for me, that's one of my bigger struggles when it came to anger, was actually letting things go. I would let it fester too much, or I would think about it and I would justify it in my own head. And then when I go to think about it later, you kind of think about how ridiculous it actually was. And like, it was nothing like what you were originally thinking in the moment. But in the moment, I was justified, darn it, for how I was feeling. It was always the other person's fault. But
then I know that you're supposed to tell people too when you're angry, when they anger you, you're supposed to, because it may have just been a simple misunderstanding, but sometimes I don't think we're very good at that either.
No. And one thing that I've noticed, I'm not sure if you guys could agree with this, but like we have an idea in our head, or we set a standard in our head, but like for me, I don't always communicate that to somebody else. So when they don't meet that standard or they don't meet my expectations, I get mad. But how can I really get mad at them for not meeting that expectation when I've never really communicated the expectation to begin with.
I think a lot of approaching someone about, letting them know, that they frustrated you or angered you, is that you're afraid that it will develop into something bigger than as if you would just not say anything at all, and keep that build up in you, that you don't want to make the situation worse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I actually say something very similar to my wife quite often. It'll be little things.
Yeah.
She'll see that I'm like annoyed or whatever. She's like, "Well, what's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm good. Just let it go. Nothing. I'm getting over it. Just let it go." "Well, what's wrong? What's wrong? Just tell me. I could tell something's wrong." "I'm not going to tell you, because if I say something, it's just going to spark another argument, or it's just going to, make this little ember start to burn even hotter, and then we're both going to get angry, and then it's just going to be 10 times worse."
And sometimes we can dissect certain things that stick with us that may have triggered that anger, that are focal points. And then, like you said, if you just relax and just let it ride a little bit, you'll think about it when you calm down. And it, like you said, it really wasn't directed the way I interpreted it to be.
Boy, sometimes though, sometimes you just say something that's just too late. You just take your lickings.
Yeah.
It just, Luke, I believe a couple of weeks ago I don't remember what it was, but he said something to his mom, and I just started laughing and walked out of the house. I had stuff to do out in the garage, and I said, "You're on your own, buddy.
You dug that hole.
I'm out of here. Good luck." It was, but yeah, sometimes you just, sometimes I just can't help myself. I just get my own way too. The anger, that's anger in others, but my wife, I'm probably the annoying part. I probably get to her sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's definitely a give and take for sure. And I would, like, when I say the whole, me just saying, "Oh, nothing." It's never usually anything big, or it's just the little annoying stuff that kind of picks at you and eats at you.
But
Luke, you're being awfully quiet. Do you have anything to add? I know you get angry.
Yeah. He can attest to that.
doesn't do him good though.
Yeah.
He's pretty good tempered, but it's always funny when he gets angry though, because he gets real quiet. Which he's normally quiet anyway, but what little he does talk, he doesn't talk at all. And you got to force it out of him, but he's pretty good tempered.
Yeah.
Unlike his dad.
Just remembered a trick I read from a book a couple years ago. Whenever a guy's mad, he would just always rub his neck. Remembered a trick a couple years ago. I just edit that out.
Say that
I
again.
had the mic too far.
No, say it again. No, I didn't hear it.
A couple years ago, I was reading a book. Whenever a guy would get mad, he would just always start rubbing his neck.
So that was like his tell.
Yeah. I've kind of just been using that. It's kind of just helped me calm down a lot quicker than what I can normally do.
Have you ever carried a grudge, Luke?
No, not that I can think of.
Say I have, but I can't ever think of one time that I can remember him. I guess he can inspire me a little bit because it must come from his mom's side, but he's, like I say, pretty mild tempered.
That's good.
Carrying that
Especially
last
being
name.
younger. Anger is definitely not one of those emotions that you want to fall trap to, and really like let it set and like dig in its roots early on. Because then if it's like we talked about it during, like with sexual temptation, like you let it get in early, it's just going to dig in. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. So if you can figure out ways to cope with it now, or to just let it roll off your back, like you were saying, like the whole rubbing your neck and stuff before, those are good things to do. Just kind of like work through it at the time and then just let it pass.
How do you deal with people that you've angered for whatever reason, and
See,
really, really angry at you.
I have this toxic trait where I care too much about what people think about me. So if I know that somebody's mad at me, or if I've ticked them off, or if they don't like me, then I will change my entire personality around them to try to correct that. But
For me, it just depends on the person and the reason why they got mad. Because if, like, I'm trying to think of something. They did something to you and you just set one back, like go back and forth, and they're mad at you. I'm like, that's your problem. You shouldn't have got mad. But if I like did something harmless and they got mad, they'll be like, look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. All that.
Was pulling a trailer a couple weeks ago, 40-foot trailer down Washington Street. And I was making a right-hand turn, which is always difficult pulling a big trailer anyway. So I drifted in the left lane. I made sure there was no traffic. There was one car probably 200 yards behind me. As soon as I drifted in that left lane to set up for my right-hand turn, this guy just laid on the horn and laid on the horn, laid on the horn. Well, the light turned red, and he pulls up beside me, rolls his window down, and starts screaming at me. And he said, "You're taking up both lanes." And I looked at him, I smiled, and I said, "I'm turning right, but you're taking up both lanes." I said, "I'm only taking up a lane and a half, and I really need both lanes." I said, "But when that light turns green, you could go straight, I'll turn right. We don't ever have to look at each other again." And his wife the whole time is shaking her head that I'm right. And he was so angry at me, which all I could do was kind of laugh at him. Like, what do you want me to do? I need to turn right. But to this day, I'm sure he's still really ticked off that I took up a lane and a half. I mean, I don't know why it didn't inconvenience the guy at all, but I really felt bad for him.
that's a good example, I think, of when somebody feels like they've been wronged. And so they make their mind up that, they've been wronged, and the way that they feel is justified. So they're going to hold on to that, and then it's just going to fester. And I think, unfortunately, we all are kind of guilty of that from time to time. It's just trying to minimize.
I think society as a whole helps contribute to that style of mindset of not, him, obviously noting that you're pulling a trailer and you're trying to make the turn. Everybody's just, I think we live in a me society.
Yes.
And that's, they don't think about what they say because, some people, they really don't care.
No.
Or he's never pulled a 40-foot trailer trying to make a right-hand turn. One or the other.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And we've talked about it in past episodes where it's like the society that we live in today, unfortunately, we're so self-centered and so focused on what can I get out of it, or how is this going to impact me, rather than focusing on the community in general. So I can see your point where it's definitely a lot easier to get angered when we're so me focused that every little inconvenience that comes our way is just going to set us off.
Yep.
I was telling Jason, heard this story once before in our Bible study class. I had it kind of goes back to last Sunday's sermon and in our Sunday school class, and about anger and approaching people, let them know when they've been offended, and forgiveness. And I had a coworker. We lived two different lifestyles. We didn't hang out after work. We didn't do things together. And he came to me one day and he said he wanted to meet. He called me on the radio, so I said sure. And I met him, and he said, "I want to let you know I got saved." I said, "Well, I'm proud of you. Good job." He goes, "But I also want you to know I forgive you." I said, "Okay, I appreciate that." To this day, I don't know what I ever done to that guy.
You should have asked him.
I should have, but it was his moment. He just got saved. He was trying to turn his life around, but evidently somewhere in our 20-year history, I wronged that guy. But I can't think for the life of me what it would ever be.
And I think that's
that's probably been 5-6 years ago when that happened. And today I can still think of it like, I still don't know what in the world I ever did to that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, we just never hung out because I that wasn't the lifestyle that I would lead or be a part of that he was. So it was kind of a funny deal, really. So I didn't know how to take that either.
Yeah, I think you handled it. Thank you for forgiving me, and just kind of let him have his moment, but like in the same
I
time,
said, hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Don't have any idea what I ever did. But it goes back to that. If I'd wronged him 20 years ago and if he'd just told me, and I talked to that story I talked about last week. I had another coworker when I was a recruit told me he didn't like hunting, didn't like fishing. No one should own a gun except the government, which is completely opposite of me.
Yeah.
I'm not way far right, but my life revolves around hunting and fishing and the outdoors and firearms, and I mean that's just me. So over the years we worked side by side, worked in the same division several times. Great guy, great worker, great policeman, great investigator. But every day he would ask, occasionally he'd say, hey, you want to go to lunch with us? No, I got plans. No, I'm not going to go. No, thanks for the invite. But I would always refuse to break bread with that guy because of his beliefs and my beliefs, which it puts me in the wrong. I mean, I was wrong. I should have, no matter what his beliefs were, I just did. He wasn't somebody I was going to break bread with. So one day he asked me, we're talking 20 years. He asked me, man, how come you never go to lunch with us? It's like, we have two different belief systems, so if my buddies seen me hanging out with you and knowing how you are and things you believe in, I'd never hear the end of it. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you don't like hunting. You don't like fishing. You don't think anybody should own a gun except the government and police. He said, who told you that? I said, well, you did. When? I said, like my first day on the job. He said, I was probably just hazing you as a rookie. He said, I hunt, I fish, I own guns, my kids hunt. So for 20 years, I stayed away from this guy for no reason, because he is a great guy. He's a great guy. And we've always been friendly to each other, just not good friends. And it was a shame because we probably would have had a great friendship.
That's 20 years of
20 years
good
of
friendship. I possibly missed out on.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's got a great family, good wife. His dad's a well-known baseball coach for years in Howard County, and a great guy. I know his brother. His brother and I have been friends for years. But so there, it's kind of, he didn't anger me, so it's kind of a little bit off topic. But
well, I think it's right there because going back, also tying into what Jason was saying about our society, I think since we are so me central, and we don't want to. Maybe we're slower to voice why we're angry at somebody for whatever reason, but we're quick to burn the bridge, I think. So just like the guy that said, oh, I forgive you. You have no idea what you did, but that could have easily resulted. Like when you did it, he could have just washed his hands of you, just been done. Mm-hmm. And you have no idea why.
Yeah. And the reason I think that ties in here is kind of back what you was talking about before, is that everybody angers, even Jesus angered. But when you let it turn into sin, which I did because I held that grudge and I didn't forgive or did for 20 years. So that's an example that,
if you let it consume you.
I let it consume me over, well, maybe he shouldn't have been hazing a rookie, but that's part of the process too.
But it was also something he was passionate about.
Oh yeah.
So, we're all that way. If it's something that we hold near and dear to us, we can amplify somebody just maybe making a comment to jokingly, and you may not know it's a joke or they're just messing with you. But
yeah, he probably should have told me he was just messing with me. But then again, I should have told him a lot earlier. I'm not breaking bread with you anywhere because. But and trust me, over the course of our career, it never hampered our job. It never hampered our
working
kindness toward
relationship
each other, or but just outside of work. I mean, we'd see each other at a golf tournament once in a while, but that was, and we would talk then, but there was no going to dinner or lunches in my mind. Now since then we have been to dinner, but 20 years later.
So, excuse me. I'd like to get your thoughts on, as far as like when you do get angry now, are you guys pretty quick to let somebody know that you're angry or the reasons why, or do you still kind of have a tendency of letting it fester, or does it depend on the situation, or?
I think it depends on the person.
Or the situation.
Do you let anybody know, I guess I should ask too? Or do you just kind of shut down?
I think it's circumstantial.
Yeah.
Of course, who it is, like, how well you know someone, or I think that plays a lot into, I guess, anger, or into is how much, you pride in something and you get, maybe somebody criticizes you or something. And to me, it may not be a big criticism, but to you, it's something you're very proud of. And I think that it's circumstantial as far as it affects each one different. Each of us different, maybe the same thing being said to someone. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know how I'm trying to, if I'm getting it out right or not, but I think that just we're all made different. We all have different passions and if you care or caring or, personality wise, we all see things a little different. But I think as you get older, I don't know if you agree, Bruce, that it seems like I don't let things get to me as much as I used to.
No.
As when I was younger.
And I think that's got to be a learned skill too, because I think I'm in that transition now. Like I would let things get to me way too often, way too quick, and I would shut down. Because I would, whether it be I didn't think anybody else could, I don't know, associate with how I'm feeling or why I was getting angered or whatever the reasons were. I always kept it bottled up rather than letting them know or letting even my wife. I never really mentioned it to anybody.
Do you think that's common among males to be that way?
Yeah, because we're so independent and we're supposed to be the rod, and we're supposed to be the whether it be the breadwinners or the foundation of the family. We're supposed to be the protectors, the providers, and having that mentality. And I think it's a combination of I don't know if it's we don't want to look weak or we just feel like nobody cares because in society they kind of put that, they kind of give us that idea that they don't, if you're a man, you're supposed to be that. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be masculine, whatever it is, but don't show weakness.
Yeah.
And it's a vulnerability. Don't do that. It's okay for the women. It's okay for the children. But if you're a man, don't show vulnerability. So we have a tendency to bottle it up.
Yeah.
I've shut down. I mean, sometimes like the guys that work for me, they know if I get quiet, I got something going on upstairs, and it's probably not real good to poke the bear, and you might want to just leave me be for a little bit. But when you asked about, are you quick to tell somebody when they're angry, I guess it depends on who it is. Like sometimes my boss might anger me. And if I tell him that he angered me, there may be consequences. In our world, in the police world, anyways, in local, it's a political. So politics run all the way down. I think I said in the last one, I was our first policeman in our history ever be assigned to a fire station. So, and that came from the mayor because we didn't get along at the time. But then he angered me, and I think I told him. So I don't think he really cared.
Yeah.
But like my son, if he makes me angry, I think he usually knows pretty quick that I'm angry. But then again, I gotta, my closest friends, if if they anger me, they know, or vice versa. But generally, I don't know that they anger me much or I anger them much either. But my wife, I've never angered my wife in her 22 years of marriage. She's never been angry at me because every time I ask her what's wrong, she always tells me nothing.
That's a great relationship.
So I know I've never made her angry because I always ask her, what's wrong? Nothing.
Okay.
So we're good.
They're good. So, and then I guess when I was asking about like talking to somebody or like letting people know, I don't necessarily mean the person that you're angry at, but do you ever like vent or do you have some kind of an outlet, I guess, for it, or do you just kind of like stuff it down deep and then just?
My wife hears it
Okay.
a lot,
I agree.
which usually makes her angry right with me.
Oh, with you. Guys like anger at you or with you?
No,
Okay.
she's usually, or she'll tell me, you need to, get over it. That's nothing to be angry about.
Yeah.
She's not afraid to.
And I think I'm starting to get to that point now where I feel more open to actually just venting to my wife, because like before I would just shove it down, didn't want to show that vulnerability, whatever the reason was. But now that I use her as an outlet, I'm able to let things go a little bit. Like usually, like there's times like we usually talk on her way to work, which is on my way home from work. So we're on the phone talking. There's been times that entire ride home, I'm just griping about something that happened at work or something that somebody else did. And she'll just sit there and just be quiet. And then like at the end, like she's got to go into work. I'm like, oh, sorry. I spent the whole time ranting. And she's like, no, you're good. So I think that's helped me tremendously, whereas before I would just keep it bottled up. And I heard something a while back when I was really like struggling with anger, and I was actually got to the point where I was talking to somebody about it, and I told her, I was like, I always feel like I'm going from 1 to 100, like in an instant. And she's like, are you really going from 1 to 100, or are you starting out at 99? Because you're keeping everything bottled up and you're not letting anything out. So you're already almost to your tipping point. So whenever anything, even the smallest action happens, you flip your lid and you lose your mind or whatever I end up doing. And that kind of like hit home with me. So I was like, that's when I was really trying to focus on, okay, I got to have an outlet. And we could talk more about outlets here in a little bit when we're going to dealing with anger. But have you guys ever experienced that as you're younger before you really like kind of started opening up more? Or have you always been pretty open with communicating with wives? And
No, horrible. Horrible that holding, bottling it in, and it just like you said, and then you was always at 99% because it was always eating at you and it was always rooted in you. So then when that little thing happened or something, it just your fuse was, the match was there and the fuse was lit.
And you're so used to being at 99 that you don't know that you're there anymore. It's almost like your base level, your standard now.
Yeah.
And you feel like that's at 1. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take much. Yeah. And, I coached youth sports for years. My kids were growing up, so I have no idea why I would get angry all the time. But so if you guys haven't experienced with youth sports, but
Yeah. It's now you got me curious if most of those days if I wasn't already in the 90s when I did get to that 100 pretty quick, because it's makes a lot of sense, really.
yeah.
There's some things at work that, and you probably know it from your military career, that just you see and it reminds you of something from the past, or it brings back bad memories or bad things that you've seen in your career, and your days just went bad real quick.
And I think, unfortunately, for us, especially, you're being a police officer for how long have you been a police officer?
29.
20, so about 30 years. You've seen the worst that humanity is capable of, unfortunately. You know, so that lingers with you, and you.
Oh yeah.
So it does affect.
It always comes back.
It does come back. Yeah, and that's one of those things. Like some of the stuff that I would either saw or dealt with at our unit, went through whatever overseas, and that was always something that I was like, I'm not bringing that home. I'm definitely not going to tell my wife about it. And then there's so very few people back home that could really, associate with what I went through or what I, dealt with or whatever it was. So you're bottling that on top, down deep, and then you got stuff that's bothering you that you're just shoving on top. So unfortunately for law enforcement and the military and for other first responders, you're seeing the worst that humanity is capable of, or the worst situations that people have to go through, and that sticks with you. I mean, it's hard it's just not something you can really flip a switch and forget about.
No, and it's some things that it gets you to where some things that shouldn't anger you do. Because honestly, it's stuff I can't control. Mm-hmm. They used to say, if it's not, the last 5 or 10 years it's been, if it's not in my bubble, I don't worry about it. And I like to keep things out of my bubble. But sometimes things come inside my bubble that bring back memories of other things I've had to deal with, and which kind of will make things 10 times worse. When you work a really, really bad child molest 15 years ago, one that'll haunt me forever, and then or neglect case, it was horrific. And then, just in the last 2 months, I worked my tail off on a molest case where a mom was involved in allowing her daughter to get alleged to be involved, to allow her daughter to be molested. And you work tirelessly on it, and you finally get them in jail, and they're out before you get your paperwork done.
Yeah.
With no bond, just released for no reason, just because they're a great citizen, and that sends a spike in you that just is out of this world. And then you got to deal with that, and then you're really ticked off over that, and then something minor happens throughout the day that you're already focused on. That just happened, and then now this just happened, and then this just happened, and then luckily that's where I have a really, really good, is I'm really blessed, is because I have a really good sounding board at home, and I will blow it off to her, my wife, and she will listen, take it in, and then it doesn't make things better, but it just makes me take it better, I guess. And hope I get it. It's about like not let it linger when the sun goes down. Those are hard ones to get over. But then again, I can't control that. I can control my part, but I can't control once they're in the process, once they're in jail. I can't control the court system.
And unfortunately, I would classify that as like a righteous type of anger rather than sinful anger. But unfortunately, it's still a type of anger that we carry with us, like you were saying. So it could be the littlest thing that gets stacked on top of it that causes you to just kind of flip that switch and get angry or take it out on somebody else. And then that could be a sinful anger as a result, but it's rooted in a righteous anger, I guess.
Years ago, I had and this guy actually works for me now, and he's a great detective, probably one of the better investigators I've ever worked with. But he always tells a story when he hired on. There was a recruit. There's a group of them, and I could never tell them apart. I could never figure their numbers. Their badge numbers were always so close. And one of them wasn't the best report writer. And I had a captain at the time that when you'd always say how things roll downhill.
Yes.
Well, I'd approved a supplement that I obviously didn't read very well because it was the grammar on it and it was just horrendous. And I took the biggest chewing from my captain because I approved that report and was instructed to get with this officer and make him correct it. So I bring this officer in and I really chew on him pretty good. I was pretty hot because I took one for him, and so he was going to take one, and I'm reading him his report and handed it to him. It's like, I want you to read that. You tell me what you think. And after about 10 minutes into this, he looks at me. He goes, "Sir, this isn't me." And I said, "Really?" And I looked at it and I said, "It's not you. So get out of my office." It's like, but when you do see him, you tell him how mad I was. So he still tells that story today, that was probably the worst butt chewing he's ever had in his life, and it wasn't justified because it wasn't him.
Yeah.
But the person who it was is a fine officer in his own right, So it's kind of funny now. Gosh, they've probably been on 15 years now, so they're veterans of the group. But that was a combination of everything piling on, and then so yeah, he probably shouldn't have got that.
But he took it.
He took it.
He took it like a champ.
And he said he passed it on too to his coworker,
I'm sure he did too. So,
who was luckily off that day.
So dealing with our anger is, I think, it's an essential skill to learn. I mean, especially if we're feeling anger, and a majority of what we feel is sinful. We need to learn how to deal with it to where we can just shed it quickly and just move on. So I think one of the biggest skills that you need to learn how to utilize when dealing with your anger is learning the signs that you're starting to escalate. And that's something that I never really got early on. Cause I don't know, maybe it was just anger was such a natural part of my personality at the time, but I would never really realize I was as angry as I was until I got there. So I think it's essential to learn the steps that you go through that you lead up to you getting to that breaking point, so that way you can kind of squash it early. You guys agree?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree with that.
So when you feel like, I would like to get your guys' input on like what you do personally, as far as like when you start to feel anger coming up, what do you do to kind of like keep it suppressed, or how do you get over it quickly? Do you guys have anything that you do on a regular basis, or is it just like case by case type thing, or is it not really something you've really thought about?
I try to analyze things more than I used to.
Okay.
Or, because sometimes, say you have a problem at work, something's on your mind, and I found as I get older, I can think about multiple things but not be good at accomplishing anything, getting things done. But if you have something on your mind, I think you got to have a clear mind. And I think that's what I said with getting age. I've had more patience.
And now, do you ever overanalyze anything, or does it cause you to get more angry, or?
Yes, it can be a bad thing, but it also, gets you to slow down a little bit, or try to change your thought pattern. Try to, I guess, just reading scripture and it kind of puts everything in perspective, I guess, as far as I've gotten older and gotten more into the Bible, and your things that you used to prioritize as high, as I've gotten older and more into the book, it's not as important anymore. And like, I think as you get older, you have a lot of friends. Like, if a lot of people, as I get older, my circle's really small.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife is my best friend, and I see my buddies occasionally, but so I just think, I don't know if it's just like a midlife thing where you slow down, but I think for me, I don't let things bother me or try to consume me.
Yeah.
I have to say I've gotten a lot better in the last several years about the same thing. I mean, something might really, really anger me. I'll go home and talk to Laura, and like I said, my best friend too. So I talk to her and sleep on it and reevaluate it, and probably realize the next day it really wasn't worth being angry about.
But of the four of us here, is when you do get angry or mad and let it bother you, what's the good outcome of that, of a reaction to that, and not, how many times do you regret something you said or an action you made? Just like you said, your dad, he slipped a wrench, pulling an alternator off, and then his reaction was to throw a wrench, and then the reaction was what?
Busted
$200 windshield, or something. But I think it's you that too, and if you have children, like my son, I don't want to see him. I mean, he's trust me, Colt seen me get frustrated. He's seen me get mad, but I think you try to not show that, and in times that I did get mad, is I told him, look, that's not the way I should have acted. That's not how you should handle yourself, and as you try to be a mentor to your son, just like you with Luke. You want to bring a good example to the table or to your family. And it's like my case now, I have grandchildren. So, you gotta, they look up to you. There's always eyes on you. Everything you do, there's always a set of eyes on you. You just gotta keep that in mind. And then I think Bill had a sermon the other day, or maybe it was in our class we was talking. It was just, you think of the things that God went through and how he carried himself, and try to be a godly person. That what we're going through isn't near that.
Yeah.
And it's minute. So don't let it bend your character or make you a person that you don't want to be.
We'll also learn too. Something may anger me kind of quick, and get the wheels turning, and my blood pressure boiling. But I'm always the older I get, the more this has been true, is I'm very, very, very slow to respond to that. I think things through now. I may go for a walk. I may go for a drive. I may go fishing for a day, and just chill out on a boat and think things through. And then, I'm really slow to respond to the anger, and it's helped me because I generally realize what angered me or upset me really wasn't worth it. It's not in the big scheme of things. It's not. It shouldn't have bothered me. It did, but I can't control it. I can't fix it. Can I fix it? No. Can I control it? No. It's kind of like when people always want to come and kind of tell me about what's going on in the other areas of the apartment, I always stop them and I say, wait a minute, do I have a right to know in my function? No. Do I have a need to know? No. Then I don't want to know. I don't want it in my bubble. So I'm really slow at responding to what angers me.
And it's hard for men because we're fixers. Like you said, Brad, that's what I do for a living. I fix things, and that's been that way for pretty much my whole working career. Worked in maintenance or electrical, and that's what's hard is especially when it frustrates you if you upset someone and you didn't mean to, but there's nothing that you can do to fix that, and then that in return you get angry because you're a fixer. I know in my marriage that's been, I want it fixed. Well, it don't work that way, Jason. I want it fixed. And it's that brings anger. That's, something that you can't control, that you want to repair. You didn't mean for it to happen.
Yeah.
But we're fixers. At least I know I am.
I can definitely associate with that. I would say for me, they sound cliche, but when I'm in the moment and I'm starting to feel like I'm getting irritated or annoyed, or I know those are the two things that really lead to me getting angry, is that irritation or annoyance. If I'm starting to feel it, then I just try to take deep breaths. It's silly, but I'll count in my head. I don't know if it just takes my mind off of things or whatever, but it kind of tries to help bring me down. But I would say, and he does it out of playfulness, but like when you have a teenage son and they don't know where the line is, and you're trying to help them find that line, or so they don't keep crossing it, and they keep poking the bear. And I got to the point where I'm just like, Kayla, you get him. You got to get him, because he's not going to like it if I respond. And sure enough, if he keeps poking, and it won't even be anything like super serious, but like I'll respond, or like he's trying to wrestle with me, so I'll wrestle back, and he won't like it. So it's like just trying to. I think what's helped me a lot is once I realized or recognized when I start to get that irritation or that annoyance, and then I can start to implement those little practices early. I don't spike, or I don't spike as quick. And then like what you were saying, Bruce, is like just finding an activity or activities that you can just use as an outlet. You know, love being outdoors, so hunting or fishing. I think when I was going through my like peak anger issues, one of the things I really started getting back into more was just working out or lifting weights, because like I could get angry. Well, I'm going out to the gym and I'm going to be throwing, a couple 100 pounds of steel around. It's a good outlet for me to get my anger out of my system. And so I think it's extremely important to just for people to find what relaxes them, or kind of like takes their mind off of whatever is bothering them, or just something to kind of help bring them back down to where they need to be. So
I remember one time I got really angry at Luke.
Which time?
This one was a bad one. I took on some mowing jobs, saved up a bunch of money, did some masonry work, fixed some chimneys, because there was this one 5/6 weight Orvis fly rod I wanted. The rod itself was like $600. And I saved up and saved up and saved. I had the money, but I didn't want to take away from the family. But so I worked all this.
You just didn't want to hear it from my mom.
What'd you say?
You just didn't want to hear it from my mom.
Yeah, I didn't want to hear it from your mom, either taking the money. But so I finally saved up enough. I got this fly rod. I was so proud of that thing. Do you remember what happened with that fly rod?
No.
You don't remember shutting it in the tailgate of the truck a day after I got it?
I do now.
And all I could say was, he kept saying, "I'm sorry, Dad." And I'm like, "I know you're sorry, but you need to go in the house right now and just leave me alone." I was like, "You know how hard I worked to get this." And it was like, and he was so young at the time, he didn't, that concept of, I just worked 2 months to buy this thing, and now I don't have it. And his exact words were, "Well, I'll buy you another one." I thought, okay, you need to go in the house for a while. Leave Dad alone. Do you ever remember that? Oh, I still got part of it. I'll show you what half of it looks like. So I still kept one half.
It's funny.
And I never did replace it.
Yeah.
But
I think it's good that you knew that you're angry, and rather than just letting them have it, you're like, all right, we got to separate ourselves, or
he just
gonna
get away
worse.
from me for a minute.
Yeah.
I know it was an accident, but if you'd have just looked, you'd have saw that thing was still together.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the same thing when, wrestling with the kids, especially when they're a little bit younger. They like to try to just go, harder and harder, and then something happens. You get kicked somewhere, or you get hit in the face. Or, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And they think they're gonna get in trouble. Like, just take some deep breaths. Like, all right, you're fine. I know it was an accident. It still hurts. Just let me work through it. Just go over there for a second.
Yep.
So it's just separating yourself from the situation so it doesn't escalate. So
I've had a couple times where in the past, I know you probably remember this, when I went off on a guy at work.
Oh, yeah.
So you care if I just tell the story?
go ahead.
So I'm going to have to take some words out of it just because that's how mad I was.
Luke.
So this is like 3 years ago. Will be 3 years ago in August.
It's been a while back.
So where I work at, it's I work. This is at Maximum Power Sports. It's UTV Power Sports dealership. I'm basically, the official resume title is building maintenance, but
He's a janitor.
pretty much.
Cleans the bathrooms.
I'm basically, if they need me to do anything, I'm here. So I was outside putting metal in our metal dumpster that we have. Because I think they get like paid for putting my metal in it or something like that. I was outside all morning, like from 9 to 11 o'clock in the morning. I was just throwing metal inside. Finally, when I got done, or I had like I was tired enough to where I was like, okay, I need to go inside and get something to eat. I went into Holly's office and bought like a Snickers for $1. And I don't think I ever told you about the Snickers part, did I?
No.
Bought a Snickers for $1, set it on the counter. And I went to the bathroom, came back, filled up my water, set my water bottle down, started to walk back with the Snickers. And then I realized I had left my water bottle. Started walking back, and then my coworker, who I now talk to him every time I'm there now. Back then, we kind of really didn't get along that well. So during then, we had one of our finance guys. He was the son of the owner, and occasionally he'd get on, I don't know what it would be called, where he'd just go on cleaning rants and just start cleaning random stuff. He's done it before that day. I didn't have a problem with it. That day he chose to clean the bathroom, this was a Thursday and I usually did it every Saturday. He chose to clean the bathroom and I see he did that. I kept going. When I went back, the guy at the parts who works in parts walked up, told me, asked, hey, you see who's cleaning the bathroom? I said no just because I didn't want to have a conflict about it. And he said, well, it's pretty bad that the owner's son has to clean the bathroom. I was like, dude, I've been outside throwing metal in the dumpster all day. Isn't it your job to do parts? He's like, yeah. Keep in mind, this guy before then would always sleep. That's kind of why I said that. He's like, isn't it your job to do parts? He goes, well, I do parts. I said, no, you don't. You can go yourself. You got your thing first. And I just started walking away, and he started cussing at me. I cussed back at him, and he just walked away. I remember I only took like 2 bites out of that Snickers bar. I was so mad, I just threw it at the dumpster. Today, I'm more upset about the Snickers bar than yelling at him. But now, whenever I get in a situation where I'm starting to get mad, I just put my earbud in and just listen to music.
There you go. That's a good outlet.
You forgot to mention that he was like 6 times your size.
And weight.
In size. That guy would have crushed you.
He's got to catch me first. No, he's a good guy now.
I think that's a good comment or a good example of both the sinful anger side of it, but then also learning from it, and then now like you have a good outlet for it, like when you do start to get angry. So I think transitioning over to now that we've identified what causes us to get angry or when we start to get angry, now we're trying to I guess maybe fix it so we don't get as angry or quickly get angry, or so we just get rid of it quickly, I guess. So obviously identifying the root cause and you're identifying your levels so you know when you're not getting too high. Those are pivotal. But we got to realize too, it's not an overnight fix. Okay. We've probably spent, as men, we spent most of our lives learning how to get angry and probably the wrong way of dealing with the anger. So fixing it is not going to be an overnight fix. I know when I was trying to, my answer personally was, okay, instead of getting super angry about everything, I'm just going to make sure I don't get angry about anything. And what happens when you make a pendulum go from one extreme to the other, you're just going to keep bouncing back and forth, extreme to extreme so you can only take so much of, I'm going to try to let everything roll off my back. I'm not going to let anything get to me. And at some point, stuff's going to start festering again, and you're just going to make that drastic swing back over to the other side. So I think you got to kind of find that medium middle ground where, especially if it's a righteous type of anger, then yes, you can, I don't know, explore it or do whatever you need to do. But if it's that sinful, more selfish type of anger, just recognize it early, and then just try to do what you need to do, like to go through your steps to squash it. But I think it's important for people to realize it's not an overnight fix. It's going to take, if you think of how long it took you to get to where you are with your anger, how long is it going to take for you to grow in your patience and all that? You're talking about, you're having grandkids and you're starting to feel where you're getting to be more patient as you get older. How old are you now?
I'm 50.
So you're 50.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the guys, I would say that if they're listening and they're probably in their 20s or 30s, they got to realize hey, patience is a virtue, but it's a learned skill. You got to be able to practice it over and over and over again.
Yep.
And you got to give yourself grace whenever you fail.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the best thing to do,
No, I was just going to ask if anybody had anything to add.
to learn about patience, sometimes the best thing to do if you want to learn patience and you're starting to get angry, just walk away.
Yeah.
I had to do that recently again at work.
Yeah. I think it's big is if you're able to identify and you can just walk away, and if that's what you got to do to kind of separate yourself from the situation so you don't keep getting angry, you might let it fester in your head for a little bit, but that first step of just stopping the act is pivotal, and then go through your steps to minimize the anger later. But also, I want to add this. I think we've talked about it in past episodes, but if you're praying for patience, or if you're praying for God to help you with your anger, you got to be ready for the answer, I guess is a good way to put it. Don't expect him to just take away your anger or just to grant you a bunch of patience. He's going to put you in situations where it's going to force you to exercise patience. He's going to put you in situations that are going to test your anger
before it gets better.
Yes. So, the huge step obviously is praying. When you're in a situation, you're starting to feel angry, just, say a little prayer, God, help me, grant me the patience to get through this, or take away my anger, whatever you need to do, get me out of the situation, whatever, but take it to him instead of trying to do it on your own. And I would say, lastly, for me, one big thing that helped me is just finding somebody to keep you accountable. So whether that's another brother in Christ, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coworker that knows what you're going, whatever it is, your spouse. And I'm using my wife more and more in recent years, but find somebody to hold you accountable. So you do that little vent session, and they'll either kind of dissect the situation with you and okay, well, yeah, I can see where you got angry, but let's think about this, or they'll say, well, you're kind of full of it, and they weren't trying to do whatever you thought they were trying to do. Mm-hmm. That's somebody that's going to hold you accountable, not somebody that's just going to agree with you at every step of the way. So I think that is extremely important. What do you guys have to say?
I think that, and maybe it's just because of getting older, but again, just being slow to respond and being patient. And then a lot of times you realize what angered you probably shouldn't have, really. Some things just gonna, in my world, some things just gonna make you mad, but it's things I can't control.
That's the key.
I can't control it, so I shouldn't let it bother me. But it does. If it didn't bother me, I guess I should have retired 5 years ago. But I'm still pretty passionate about the job, and still I take it serious. And I think if I could share anything with anybody, it would be just be patient when something angers you. find the outlet like you was talking about, and just be slow to respond, if you even have to respond at all. Sometimes, like in that instance, I found another judge who was a senior judge, and went to him and expressed, hey, this should not happen. Why is this happening? And he explained it to me, and he said, well, I'll go talk to the person that did that, and they assured me that it shouldn't happen again, and it will. I know it will sometime in my career. What I got, little I got left, but and it'll probably anger me then too. Depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
But I'll be the first to tell you too. The jailhouses are full of good people that make mistakes, but there are also some people in there that do not deserve to breathe the same air as our children. But there are a lot of good people in there, so I get both sides of why a judge wants to put people out, and that's their decision, not mine. But I'm not always going to be happy about it.
I think we'd be surprised to kind of tie into what you were saying, like if we just don't respond at all, how much of that actually helps whatever situation we're going through. Like, not everything that we're experiencing really needs to have some kind of a response. You can just walk away, and then eventually, I mean, you'll realize it's something that you can probably let go pretty easily. It was just something that really bothered you in the moment for whatever reason. So, and I think that's where a lot of like the regret moments come from for me when I think about how I responded to in the times that I was angry, that if I would have just not responded at all, that it would have been perfectly fine.
We had a speaker at FCA this fall, it's a Macaulay boy, and he was talking to the youth, and he said, he goes, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it.
I like that.
That hit me like a freight train. That's so true.
So
10% of what happens to you and 90% reaction is your life. So think of that, getting angry or mad. And I can tell you just that me responding quick after being angry is 99.9% of the time wasn't a good result.
yeah, I think that's exactly why in the Bible itself it tells us to be slow to anger, is because most of the time it's.
And there may be,
Not
I've very, very seldom has it happened that someone has known they've made me mad and come back and apologized, and you think about the time and energy wasted on you getting, that frustrating you, and then you find out it was just a misunderstanding, and it's like, 20 years,
I had a captain once tell me, kind of in the same line. It was a quote from somebody else, but he told me, he said, people will forgive you for what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So, and if you think about that, people can wrong you, how they made you feel when they wronged you, you'll never forget that. And you might forget what happened, but you'll never forget, how you felt. And that'll stick with you forever. And I've always tried to use that when I did get angry. I always thought about that. I don't want to make somebody feel in a way that they'll never forget it. Now, there's been times I wanted to make somebody feel a way that they'll never forget, but for the most part, it's always been just the opposite. I don't want that. I don't want that burden.
Yeah.
I don't want that guy coming to me 20 years from now going, I forgive you. And I don't remember what in the world I ever did to him. But a good topic.
So, just in closing, do you guys have any advice for anybody who might be experiencing anger issues, or they've realized it and they're trying to go through the steps of, I guess, correcting it or making sure they don't get angry at the drop of a hat? Like, just any life wisdom or any pearls that you want to
find an outlet.
And if you don't have an outlet, like you don't have a spouse or significant other, a best friend usually works as well.
Someone neutral.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys for for joining. It's definitely an interesting topic, and I think it's one that every single man can associate with.
Absolutely.
So we'll close out with a prayer real quick, and then we'll get you guys out of here. So, Lord, I thank you for these men today. As I said on this panel, and we're able to just discuss the tough topics that men face on a daily basis. Lord, I pray that this message reaches those who need to hear it. And I just pray that whoever is listening, they just get something out of it that you desire them to get out of this conversation, Lord. We just thank you for everything you do for us and all the blessings that you gave us. In your Son's precious and holy name, amen. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.